First contact and oversight. The crystalline spires of the Selnary observation vessel cast prismatic patterns across the bridge as Supreme Commander Valthera studied the holographic projection of Earth. Her crystalline form shifted color slightly, from deep azure to a dismissive violet, as she processed the latest reconnaissance data. The third planet of this unremarkable solar system shouldn't have warranted more than a passing scan, yet here they were, preparing for what might be the simplest conquest in the crystalline empire's history. Remarkable, she murmured, her voice resonating like wind through crystal chimes. They still rely on combustion engines and silicon-based computing. It's almost endearing. The gathered officers' crystals chimed in harmony, their species equivalent of laughter. First Officer Zyrtec approached, his crystal matrix pulsing with the stored energy of youth and ambition. Supreme Commander, the latest analysis confirms our initial assessment. Their most advanced quantum computers barely match our maintenance drones. Their strongest materials would shatter against our weakest shields. They haven't even begun to grasp crystalline consciousness transfer. Valthera's form sparkled with amusement, and yet the Galactic Council insists we follow full invasion protocols. Sometimes I wonder if the old crystals have begun to cloud with age. She gestured at the hologram, causing it to zoom in on various military installations across Earth. Look at them, still building physical barriers, still training their organic bodies for combat, still practicing with projectile weapons. The bridge crew continued their analysis, their crystalline forms refracting light in patterns of confidence and superiority. None of them noticed the subtle differences in how humans adapted their primitive technology, or the way their military exercises emphasized flexibility over automation. The Excelnary, who had long ago transcended the need for physical combat in favor of crystalline technology, saw only the absence of advancements similar to their own. Prepare the nullification wave, Valthera commanded. Let's show them true power. When their precious electronics fail, when their networks collapse, when their weapons fall silent, they'll understand the futility of resistance. Her form pulsed with anticipation, sending ripples of light through the bridge. Deep in the ship's crystal core, engineers began attuning the massive nullification array. The technology was almost artistic in its simplicity, a cascading wave of energy that would render all Earth's electronic technology useless. No need for destruction when you could simply switch off an entire civilization. Supreme Commander, Zyrtec interrupted her contemplation. There's something unusual in the historical data. These humans, they preserve outdated combat techniques. They maintain museums of ancient weapons. Some even practice traditional warfare methods as recreation. His tone carried a note of puzzlement. Valthera's crystalline surface rippled with dismissal. Cultural nostalgia. Nothing more. Many species cling to their past even as they advance. It makes the transition to our way of life easier, knowing they can preserve their history in our data crystals. The Earth continued its rotation below them, its cities glittering like scattered diamonds in the night side. The Selnary saw these lights as signs of primitive technology, never considering they might represent something far more significant: humanity's relentless drive to push forward, to adapt, to survive. Send the final notice to the Galactic Council, Valthera commanded. Operation classification. Minimal resistance expected. Primary strategy. Technology nullification. Secondary strategy. She paused, her crystal matrix chiming with amusement. None required. As the message was encoded into crystal and transmitted across the galaxy, Valthera allowed herself a moment of reflection. In all her cycles of service, she had overseen the absorption of 17 civilizations into the crystalline empire. Each one had followed the same pattern: remove their technological advantage, demonstrate overwhelming superiority, accept surrender. The humans would be no different. But as the nullification wave was prepared for deployment, as the invasion forces assembled in their crystal pods, as the strategic AI plotted optimal landing zones, not a single Selnary considered a crucial question. What happens when you take technology from a species that never forgot how to live without it? The coming dawn would bring more than light to Earth's skies. It would bring a lesson that would shatter the crystalline empire's assumptions as thoroughly as their crystal matrices could shatter under the right frequency. The Selneri were about to learn that technology isn't power, it's just a tool. And humans had been making tools since they first picked up a stick and called it a spear. The crystalline ships hung in Earth's orbit like suspended icicles, beautiful and deadly, waiting for the order that would begin their greatest miscalculation. In military bases, homes, and cities across Earth, humans went about their daily lives, unaware that they were about to demonstrate why their species had survived every catastrophe their world had thrown at them. Tomorrow, humanity would remind the galaxy that true power isn't in the weapons you hold, but in the will to adapt when those weapons fail. When silence falls, the nullification wave rolled across Earth's atmosphere like a silent aurora, beautiful and devastating. In its wake, the modern world went dark. Satellites blinked out. Power grids collapsed. Communications networks fell silent. The Selneri observed from orbit, their crystalline forms pulsing with satisfaction as human civilization seemingly ground to a halt. At the Pentagon's underground command center, General Sarah Chen watched as screen after screen went dark. The backup generators, the hardened circuits, even the old vacuum tube equipment, nothing responded. But instead of panic, a slight smile crossed her face as she pulled an old leather-bound notebook from her desk. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the increasingly quiet room, her voice carrying the calm of someone who had prepared for the impossible. "Execute Protocol Zero, and someone get me a runner to Fort Belvoir, preferably someone who remembers how to ride a horse." Across the globe, similar scenes played out with unexpected results. In London's MI6 headquarters, agents dusted off manual cipher wheels and Aldis lamps. In Moscow's military districts, old veterans taught young soldiers the art of semaphore. In Beijing's Strategic Command, officers unfolded detailed paper maps and began plotting coordinates with compasses and protractors. Supreme Commander Valthera watched the chaos unfold through her ship's crystal sensors, her form flickering with pleasure. "See how they scramble," she chimed to her bridge crew. "Their civilization crumbles without their precious electronics." First Officer Zyrtek's regular reporting rhythm faltered slightly. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting unusual patterns of movement. The humans, they're not panicking. They're organizing." In New York City, Wall Street traders switched seamlessly from digital tablets to paper ledgers, centuries-old trading protocols snapping back into place like muscle memory. In rural Kansas, farmers pulled ancient hand tools from barns, their children already knowing how to use them from countless county fair demonstrations. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal trackers began teaching military units how to navigate by stars and track by sight. The Selneri landing forces descended through Earth's atmosphere in their crystalline pods, expecting to find cities in chaos. Instead, they found an eerie order. Humans moved with purpose, using methods of coordination that required no technology at all. At Fort Bragg, Master Sergeant James Running Bear led his Special Forces team in unpacking wooden crates that hadn't been opened since World War I. "My grandfather taught me how to use these," he said, distributing compound bows and arrows. "Said someday we might need to remember the old ways. Guess someday is today." Valthera's confident glow dimmed slightly as reports flooded in. Her crystalline matrix vibrated with the first hints of concern as she processed the information. The humans were adapting far too quickly, falling back on systems and methods that should have been lost to time. In the mountains of Switzerland, bankers accessed mechanical vaults that had survived 2 world wars, implementing contingency plans centuries in the making. In Japan, corporate executives communicated through ancient messenger networks, runners carrying bamboo scrolls between skyscrapers. In Brazil's military academies, instructors pulled out manuals on jungle warfare that hadn't been updated since the Vietnam War, because they hadn't needed updating. Impossible, Valthera chimed, her crystalline form clouding with confusion. Their infrastructure is completely disabled. Their weapons are useless. Their communications are dark. How are they still functioning? The answer came from a young observer, whose crystal matrix pulsed with realization. Supreme Commander, they're not bypassing our nullification wave. They're going beneath it. These methods, they're not failing because we never considered them advanced enough to target. High in Earth's orbit, the Selnary invasion fleet hung like a chandelier of death, their crystalline technology glowing with power. But below them, humanity was remembering that before there were computers, there were abacuses. Before there were phones, there were drums and horns. Before there were missiles, there were archers who could hit a target a quarter of a mile away. In her command center, General Chen finished writing her orders in clear, precise handwriting. Get these to every major command post. She instructed a young lieutenant who had been a competitive cyclist. And spread the word. The enemy thinks they've silenced us. Let's show them how loud humanity can be without making a sound. The sun set on the first day of the invasion, but instead of the expected darkness, pinpoints of light appeared across the globe. Signal fires blazed on mountaintops, following patterns established by ancient civilizations. Drums echoed through valleys, carrying messages and codes that predated electricity. Riders galloped along old postal routes, carrying information the way their ancestors had for thousands of years. The Selnary had expected their technology nullification to bring silence. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping beneath humanity's technological advancement. The memory of how to thrive in the quiet places, how to speak without words, how to fight without modern weapons. As the crystalline ships prepared for their ground assault, they remained unaware that their greatest technological achievement had just stripped away the only thing hiding humanity's most dangerous weapons: their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their unshakable determination to survive. The art of war. The first Selnary ground forces discovered that invading Earth was like trying to grasp water. The harder they squeezed, the more it slipped through their crystalline fingers. Their initial landing zones, selected for proximity to major military installations, stood eerily empty. No resistance, no defenders, no signs of the chaos they expected from a civilization reduced to pre-industrial capabilities. Commander Sixtel's crystalline form pulsed with irritation as his elite squad swept through an abandoned military base in what humans called Germany. Their sensors detected no electronic signatures, no energy weapons, no automated defenses, nothing that suggested a threatening military force. Supreme Commander, he transmitted, his crystal matrix vibrating with confusion. The humans appear to have retreated. Shall we proceed with establishing our primary crystallization node? Valthera's response came tinged with satisfaction. Proceed, Commander. Their flight confirms our assessment of their dependency on. The transmission cut off as the ground beneath Sixtel's forces erupted. Simple rope snares, counterweighted with concrete blocks, snapped upward through their formation. The Selnary's advanced gravity stabilizers, calibrated for energy weapon recoil, failed to compensate for such primitive physics. 3 warriors shattered on impact with the bunker ceiling. Impossible. Sixtel's voice chimed in alarm. Our sensors detected no mechanisms. There weren't any. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, broadcast through a network of simple acoustic tubes built into the bunker walls. Just rope, rock, and really good timing. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In the rice paddies of Vietnam, Selnary patrols found their crystalline forms suddenly entangled in simple bamboo traps, their sensors useless against tools that needed no power to operate. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal guides led special forces teams through thermal mirages that confused alien sensors, turning the desert itself into a weapon. Valthera's command crystal pulsed with increasing agitation as reports flooded in. Her forces, equipped with technology that could devastate entire cities, were being systematically dismantled by what she had dismissed as prehistoric tools. In the Andes Mountains, Quechua descendants taught NATO forces how their ancestors had defended mountain passes using nothing but gravity and stone. Zelneri crystalline carriers, impervious to modern missiles, proved remarkably vulnerable to avalanches triggered by sound frequencies their sensors didn't even register as weapons. "They're using the planet itself against us," Zyrtec reported, his usual confident resonance wavering. "Every terrain feature, every natural phenomenon. They've turned them all into weapons." In the forests of Finland, the aliens learned why humans still taught camouflage as an art. Their motion sensors, designed to detect energy signatures and heat patterns, proved worthless against soldiers who covered themselves in mud and moved with the patience of hunting ancestors who had stalked prey for days. A particularly devastating lesson came in the Arabian desert. A Zelneri battle group, tracking what they thought was a retreating human force, followed heat signatures into a narrow valley. They discovered too late that the signatures came from small fires, strategically placed by Bedouin guides, who knew exactly how the afternoon wind patterns would trap the crystalline invaders in a sandstorm that scraped their forms like cosmic sandpaper. In orbit, Valthera watched her invasion force's coordination crystals wink out one by one. "How?" she demanded, her form flickering with rage. "How are they doing this without technology?" The answer came from a human shortwave radio broadcast, using frequencies so primitive the Zelneri had ignored them. The voice crackled with age and wisdom. "You forgot that we spent thousands of years learning to fight before we invented computers to do it for us." In India, Zelneri forces learned the hard way that elephants, trained by methods passed down through generations, could sense the crystalline resonance of their forms. Entire squadrons found themselves crushed by creatures their targeting systems classified as non-combatants. The invaders' frustration peaked when they discovered humans using their own crystalline technology against them. In Japan, martial artists who had studied crystal resonance frequencies as meditation aids began teaching soldiers how to shatter Zelneri forms with precisely pitched sounds from simple ceramic bowls. "They're learning," Zyrtec reported, his crystal matrix clouding with worry. "Every encounter, every failure. They're not just adapting, they're teaching each other. Signals we can't track are spreading knowledge across their planet faster than we can counter it." What the Zelneri couldn't understand was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their ability to learn, adapt, and pass on knowledge. Every defeat they inflicted on the humans only added to a library of tactics that was shared through a global network of runners, riders, and signals that required nothing more than human ingenuity to maintain. General Chen's handwritten notes from the first day had already been copied thousands of times, translated into dozens of languages, and distributed across continents. The Zelneri's greatest weakness, their crystalline nature, was now common knowledge among Earth's defenders. As the sun set on another day of increasingly costly victories for the human forces, Valthera faced an uncomfortable reality. Her invasion force, armed with the most advanced technology in the known galaxy, was being systematically dismantled by creatures who had turned their own primitive past into a weapon. The silent message spreading across Earth's battlefields was clear. Technology isn't power. It's just one of many tools, and humanity had spent millennia learning to use every tool nature provided. Unity in chaos. The Zelneri's crystalline command ship trembled as Valthera received the latest reports. Her invasion force, which had begun as a pristine lattice of strategic perfection, was fracturing, not from human weapons or resistance, but from something far more devastating: uncertainty. "They're everywhere and nowhere." A field commander's transmission resonated with distress. "They have no central command to target, no infrastructure to destroy, no technology to disrupt. They're fighting us with history." Indeed, humanity had turned their entire cultural heritage into a weapon. In the streets of Rome, Italian archaeologists guided military units through ancient catacombs, emerging behind Zelneri positions in ambushes that had worked against invaders for millennia. Native American trackers taught Arctic special forces how to move across snow without leaving traces the crystalline sensors could detect. Valthera's form clouded as she observed a particularly disturbing trend. Her forces weren't just fighting humans. They were fighting every lesson humanity had learned across thousands of years of warfare, distilled and adapted with terrifying speed. In Morocco, traditional desert nomads shared centuries-old water-finding techniques with stranded European forces, creating supply lines that Excelinary couldn't track. Chinese military strategists collaborated with Brazilian jungle warfare experts, combining Sun Tzu's ancient wisdom with modern guerrilla tactics. The result was a fighting doctrine that seemed to predict and counter every Excelinary strategy before it fully formed. They're using methods we can't quantify, Zyrtec reported, his crystalline resonance wavering. Their combat techniques don't follow any logical pattern our tactical matrices can process. Each human seems to fight differently, yet somehow they coordinate perfectly. In the Himalayas, Sherpa guides led multinational strike teams along paths that had existed since before recorded history. Zelneri forces, relying on mapped terrain data, found themselves trapped in valleys that didn't exist in any database. Knowledge passed down through generations of oral tradition. The invasion forces' frustration peaked when they discovered humans using methods so ancient they seemed like magic to the technology-dependent Excelinary. Aboriginal songlines guided Australian forces across vast distances without maps. African drummers transmitted complex battle plans using rhythms that seemed like simple music to alien sensors. Inuit hunters taught NATO forces how to navigate by reading snow patterns and wind directions. Supreme Commander, a desperate transmission cut through the chaos. They're not just sharing tactical information. They're sharing culture. Every defeat we inflict teaches them new ways to resist. Every technology we neutralize reveals another ancient solution. Valthera watched in growing horror as her carefully orchestrated invasion dissolved into countless small engagements, each one a lesson in human adaptation. Her forces had expected to fight a unified human military. Instead, they faced a fluid, organic resistance that drew strength from its very diversity. In Kenya, Maasai warriors taught British SAS teams how to move silently through grasslands. In Peru, high-altitude farmers showed Mexican special forces how to predict weather patterns without instruments. Each interaction spawned new hybrid tactics that spread across the global resistance network through a complex web of runners, riders, and signal fires. The breaking point came when the humans began combining their ancient knowledge with devastating creativity. In Indonesia, traditional shadow puppeteers used their art to project false images that confused Excelinary sensors. Japanese ninja descendants revealed centuries-old techniques for weaponizing everyday objects, turning simple tools into weapons that could crack crystalline forms. They're not fighting as nations anymore, Zyrtec observed, his tactical matrix struggling to process the implications. They're fighting as one species, sharing everything they know, adapting faster than we can analyze their methods. General Chen's command center had become a hub of global cooperation that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. A Native American smoke signal expert worked alongside an African drum interpreter. A Mongolian horse messenger compared notes with an Amazon tribal runner. Each brought centuries of knowledge to a resistance that grew stronger with every shared tradition. Your nullification wave didn't just remove our technology. Chen's message, transmitted through a network of ancient heliographs, reached the Excelinary command ship. It reminded us who we were before we had it. Every culture, every tradition, every lesson our ancestors learned, they're all weapons now. The sun set on another day of the invasion, but the lights that dotted Earth's surface were no longer just signal fires. They were beacons of human cooperation, each one representing another shared piece of knowledge, another adapted tradition, another step toward victory. In her command crystal, Valthera faced an uncomfortable truth. By trying to simplify their conquest, they had awakened something far more dangerous than any technology: humanity's ability to unite, adapt, and turn their entire cultural heritage into a weapon that no advanced civilization could fully comprehend or counter. Victory through wisdom. The crystalline surface of Supreme Commander Valthera's command form had grown clouded, its once pristine facets now etched with stress fractures. The Tselnari invasion force, which had arrived expecting an easy conquest, now found itself trapped in a war they no longer understood. Impossible, she resonated, watching another battle group's signals fade into silence. We neutralized their technology. We disabled their weapons. We severed their communications. How are they still beating us? The answer came from an unexpected source, a simple paper airplane that floated through an open breach in their ground command center. Unfolded, it contained a message written in multiple languages. Technology isn't the source of our strength. It's just one of many tools we've created. Want to see the others? As if on cue, the global counterattack began. In the mountains of Nepal, Buddhist monks who had spent decades studying crystal harmonics led synchronized chants that shattered Tselnari force fields. Mexican free climbers guided special forces up sheer cliff faces, bypassing alien sensor grids by moving through paths no synthetic intelligence would consider possible. In orbit, Valthera's command ship registered a cascade of failures across their remaining ground forces. Her tactical matrix, designed to process warfare through the lens of technological superiority, couldn't comprehend what it was witnessing. Humans weren't just fighting. They were rewriting the rules of combat with every engagement. Supreme Commander, Zyrtek's transmission carried an unfamiliar harmonic. Fear. They're not trying to defeat our technology anymore. They're using our own crystalline nature against us. Indeed, humanity had learned that the Tselnari's greatest strength, their crystalline form, was also their greatest weakness. Australian Aboriginal songlines, carried through the ground itself, disrupted their molecular structure. Ancient Chinese Feng Shui masters identified resonance points that could destabilize entire Tselnari formations with precisely placed stone arrangements. The turning point came at dawn. Across the globe, humans positioned simple glass prisms, mirrors, and lenses, technology so basic the Tselnari hadn't even considered it worth neutralizing. As the sun rose, these primitive tools focused and redirected light in patterns that transformed the morning sunlight into a weapon, creating interference patterns that disrupted crystalline cognitive functions. In her increasingly unstable command crystal, Valthera watched her invasion force collapse under the weight of human ingenuity. How? She demanded. How did they coordinate this without technology? General Chen's response came through a network of bronze bells, their frequencies chosen to penetrate crystalline sensors without harming them. We spent thousands of years learning to work together before we had computers to help us. Did you think we forgot? The final battle wasn't fought with weapons at all. As Tselnari forces retreated worldwide, they faced a demonstration of humanity's true power. Every culture on Earth contributed to a symphony of sound, light, and vibration. Tibetan singing bowls, African drums, Aztec whistles, Greek lyres, all playing in harmony. The frequencies, refined through millennia of musical tradition, created a resonance pattern that the crystalline invaders couldn't withstand. Stop. Valthera's broadcast rang across the planet. We yield. The symphony faded to silence. In its wake, the remaining Tselnari forces found themselves surrounded not by armies, but by teachers. A Native American elder offered to explain how they tracked crystalline signatures through animal behavior. A Japanese Zen master began demonstrating how they'd adapted ancient meditation techniques to disrupt alien energy fields. We don't want your surrender. General Chen's message reached the command ship through a pattern of reflected sunlight. We want your understanding. Technology isn't power, it's a tool. True strength lies in knowing how to live without it, how to adapt, how to remember the old ways while embracing the new. In the aftermath, as the Tselnari fleet prepared to depart, they received their final lesson. Every human culture contributed to a library of knowledge, not digital, but written on materials ranging from paper to bamboo to clay tablets. This gift to the crystalline empire contained humanity's greatest wisdom, the understanding that progress isn't about replacing the old with the new, but about carrying forward every lesson learned along the way. Remember this, the collected human leaders transmitted to the departing fleet. You didn't fail because your technology wasn't advanced enough. You failed because you forgot that the most powerful weapon any species can have is the wisdom of their ancestors combined with the courage to adapt. As Earth's skies cleared of crystalline ships, humanity faced a choice. The cellular nullification wave was fading, and soon their technology would return. But they had learned something more valuable than any technological advancement: the power of their combined heritage, the strength of their diversity, and the wisdom of keeping alive the knowledge that had helped them survive countless challenges before. In orbit, the last cellular ship paused. Valthera, her form slowly repairing itself, recorded one final observation. We came to teach them about advanced civilization. Instead, they taught us what true advancement means, not the abandonment of the past, but the wisdom to carry it forward into the future. The invasion had failed, but something far more important had been achieved. Humanity had rediscovered its greatest strength, and the galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Never mistake simplicity for weakness, for in the oldest ways often lie the strongest foundations of power.